2023 NFL Combine has commenced, and Jordan Reid from ESPN is here. And Jay Reid, the Minnesota Vikings, 23rd overall pick. A lot of people think they won't use it. They'll probably move back, but they don't really have the capital to move up the way they should or the way they have in the past. But for you, covering the draft as long as you have, what scenarios make sense for the Vikings to either stay put or switch their spots?
Well, only having 4 picks right now before the comp pick selection process comes out, where they're expected to get an extra pick in the 5th round from Tyler Conklin, I think right now the logical thing for them to do is trade back, just because you have so many holes, cornerback, wide receiver, even defensive line. So I think in order to address some of these needs, especially early on, you want to have more darts at the dartboard. The more, the better. So I think for Kwesi, the logical thing for him to do, or what he could do, is trade back from 23.
If the Vikings do, let's say, pick at 23 or trade back and then use a cornerback, that one box is already checked. Offensive lineman, that's a position group you have to go after every single year, no matter the team. Outside of those 2 positions, is there a surprise position groups that stands out to you that the Vikings could probably target this year?
Wide receiver.
Okay.
I think wide receiver definitely could be one. And, last year a lot of people thought they could go wide receiver before they traded back from 12. But this year I think will be really logical for them, especially with Adam Thielen. We'll see what the future holds with him. KJ Osborne proven to be a really good complementary option. And then already having who I think is the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson. And there's plenty of options for them if they want to stick and pick at 23. This isn't a wide receiver class that has that bona fide wide receiver 1 that's going to be a superstar coming into the league. But if you're looking for that bona fide wide receiver 2 to complement with JJ, I think there's some good options in this group.
That's a really good problem to have, understanding that you have a wide receiver 1 in JJ. You can find a complimentary guy in this draft. And the fact that we have a guy under contract that we know can already throw the ball to JJ and Kirk Cousins, that gives Vikings fans somewhat of a relief. But at the same time, there is a quarterback market in this draft that, a lot of people are predicting to be able to, either be day one starters or be projects. How do you think the Vikings should attack the quarterback market this year?
Well, you have Kirk under contract for 1 more year this year, but they could look for somebody to develop behind them, and they thought Kellen Mond potentially could be that guy. But I'm always a fan of taking a quarterback every 2 years, just because they're like lottery tickets. Kirk Cousins was a great example of that back when he was with the Commanders, and I think they could look to take one on day 2 or day 3. Some that are my favorite, Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA. He's one that I like, and also Jake Haener from Fresno State. Just some guys that if Kirk does miss some time or something like that, if he was to go out and miss a couple games, you need to be able to have somebody behind him that they can trust.
Moving back to the defensive side of the ball, it's a loaded draft. And I know a lot of people are saying, there aren't the premium guys that we've seen of the past, but there are some guys in this draft that can, fill in some slots for this Minnesota Vikings defense. For you, building this draft, do you start outside in or inside out if you're a general manager?
Well, I'm always a fan of starting inside out, just because the trenches are so important. And we see it in the NFC North. Some of these other teams that are building, Green Bay Packers already having Kenny Clark. Then some of the other players that they have, Preston Smith is another great player that they have. Chicago, they're still rebuilding right now. But Detroit, they've invested so many resources in that defensive line. Aiden Hutchinson. Some of the other players that they have, James Houston, who was another good player for them too. So I think for the Vikings, they need to build inside out. You already have. We'll see what happens with Dalvin Tomlinson if he's able to come back. You have the edges protected, I think, right now with the defensive ends, Danielle Hunter, and then also Zadarius Smith. So they need some more depth there. Patrick Jones, I think, is going to come along really nicely. I still think they need that big run stuffer in the middle, like a Mozzie Smith from Michigan. I think he would be a really good option. Maybe a Siaki Ika from Baylor. He's another option too. So for me, I think inside out would be better.
Man, that's an interesting take because, like you said, stopping the run is always the number 1 goal for any team. But being able to, go inside out and get some guys that can defend and, kind of complement the pass rush, I think that's a really good point. But complementing that pass rush at cornerback position, do you what scenarios do you see the Vikings, trying to get a top-name guy versus someone that kind of fits that physical man corner that Brian Flores likes to have in his cornerbacks?
Well, I think the interesting thing to watch for the Vikings this year is how they adjusted a new scheme, just because they were really laid back last year under Ed Donatel, but now you completely turn the volume notches up, the aggressive notches up with Brian Flores. He wants to play man coverage, but in order to play man coverage, you have to have guys that are capable of doing that. Andrew Booth Jr., I think he's one that's capable of doing it, but he's just been banged up all throughout his college career. And then last year, he battled some injuries too. Caleb Evans with the concussion things that he has going on. And then we'll see what happens with Patrick Peterson if he's back. So right now, I still think they need some more depth in that room. Duke Shelley was a great find for them too as well. But I think in that room, I think you need one more young body.
Are there any young bodies that play physical and kind of fit the Flores scheme or style of cornerback that stands out to you that's in this draft?
Yeah, Deonte Banks from Maryland. He's one that I would put a gold star beside if I was Vikings fans. I think he's going to be a familiar name that you see projected to the Vikings, but also one, if they trade back, let's say to the beginning of the second round, Tyreek Stevenson from Miami. He's another that performed really well at the Senior Bowl, and he checks a lot of those boxes that Brian Flores looks in a man-to-man scheme.
My last thing for you, and I know you don't like to put this on camera, but you have an affinity for the purple, and I know you have to be objective, but at the same time, with that affinity, with that objective affinity, what is the next step for this Minnesota Vikings team to get over that hump?
I think for them, like I said earlier, I think what's going to be really interesting to watch this year is just the youth movement. I think they have to play some of these young guys, especially in the secondary, let Booth, and then also Evans play. Scene coming back this year. I think you're going to see a lot of infuse of youth in there. Brian Asamoah, a player that they're really excited about. So also development. I think they need to get a little bit better with development on that side of the ball too. So developing those defensive starters, just because I think they're plenty explosive on offense. They showed that last year, but getting that defensive side of the ball figured out, I think that's going to be crucial for them going into this next season.
That's awesome. Jay Reid, as always, appreciate your time. This is not the last time we'll talk before now and draft night late April. Appreciate you.
Thanks as always, Gabe.